All right, good evening, everyone. We are right at 6 o'clock. So just out of respect for everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone. Looks like we have a lot of participants tonight, so that's great. My name is Hannah Oden, and I am a senior planner with the town of Oro Valley and the project manager reviewing the applicant's proposal. I will also be facilitating tonight's meeting. So thank you for joining us for the first neighborhood meeting for a proposed rezoning to allow high-density residential uses on a site near you, known as Avilla, Rancho, Vistoso West. All right, so I want to start by discussing the purpose and agenda for tonight's meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to provide you with an opportunity to share your comments and concerns and have your questions about the project answered directly. The informational video for this project was posted online on November 17th. And if you haven't watched that yet, I highly recommend visiting ovprojects.com to do so. The applicant is requesting approval of a proposed rezoning from commercial to high density residential to allow approximately 125 rental homes on the subject property. So the agenda for tonight's meeting is that first, I will provide information on the public participation process and give a brief overview of the project. And next, the applicant's representative, Mr. Paul Oland from Paradigm Land Design, is going to provide a more detailed overview of the project. And after that, it will be your turn to share your questions and comments and have these addressed either by the applicant or town staff. And after that, and we have asked the applicant to be prepared to address key issues accordingly and have invited key town staff representatives. So following your questions and comments, I'll provide more information about the next steps. And I'll then conclude by reiterating the upcoming opportunities for public participation. So our number one goal tonight is to hear from you while ensuring a fair, efficient, and productive meeting. If you watch the informational video online, you may be familiar with the applicant's proposal, but tonight is an opportunity to hear directly from the applicant and town staff. And if you are not familiar with Zoom, I will provide more information about how Zoom works and how to participate shortly. And if you have any trouble with Zoom tonight, you can call Constituent Services Coordinator Jessica Hind at any time during the meeting, and she can be reached at 520-229-4711. And you can request assistance, and the information again is shown on this slide. And if you're calling in by phone tonight, the passcode to participate is also shown on this slide and is 066328. So everyone's microphone other than myself will be muted throughout the meeting tonight unless it's your turn to speak. And this is to ensure as smooth and efficient meeting as possible. Only I can turn on your microphone at the appropriate time when it's your turn to ask a question or provide comments. And this will also be the same for your video. Tonight's meeting is scheduled to go to no later than 7:30. And I'd like to note that the Zoom meeting video and the PowerPoint presentation will be posted on this project's webpage as soon as possible. Comments will also be posted on this project's comments will also be posted online on the project webpage in the form of a neighborhood meeting summary and forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council when they consider the application. So where are we in the process? So for all rezoning applications, the town requires applicants to engage in community outreach at the front end of the process before formal applications are even submitted, because it's important to hear your comments and questions early and often. An informational video was posted on ovprojects.com on November 17th, and tonight is the first neighborhood meeting for this proposal. Following tonight's neighborhood meeting, staff anticipates a formal submittal from the applicant. Just please be aware that the town is legally required to process all formal rezoning applications. A second neighborhood meeting will be held following a formal submittal and will be conducted either by Zoom or in person. Property owners near the site have been directly notified by mail. And furthermore, the site has been posted with yellow signs in multiple locations. If you weren't notified and wish to be in the future, please send a request with your name and address to ask@orovalleyaz.gov. As of today, we do not have a formal submittal from the applicant, However, we do anticipate one, and when we receive it, it will be posted on ovprojects.com. So please keep checking that webpage for updated information. All right, so first I'd like to take a moment to orient everyone with respect to the subject property. The subject property, which is outlined in yellow on this slide, is approximately 13.5 acres and vacant. It is located northwest of the Rancho Vistoso Boulevard and Tangerine Road intersection next to the Gelder Ranch Fire Station. It is also within the Rancho Vistoso planned area development, and Woodburn Avenue is located along the northern property boundary. The parcel is near the Reflections neighborhood, the Mesquite Crest neighborhood, and the Overlook at Rancho Vistoso subdivision. The Tangerine Hills neighborhood is located to the south across Tangerine Road. And across Rancho Vistoso Boulevard to the east is the Safeway Shopping Center, the Horizons neighborhood, and Big Wash. So the subject property, which is shown with the yellow star on this slide near the bottom of the image, is part of the Rancho Vistoso Planned Area Development, or PAD. So the Rancho Vistoso PAD was adopted by Town Council in 1987 and not only established the existing commercial zoning on the subject parcel, but also the zoning for the entire planned area development shown on this slide. So zoning regulates uses and development standards, which I will describe in the following slides. So the subject property, which is outlined in yellow on the right side of the slide, is currently zoned C1 commercial, which is shown in red, and also has some open space zoning, which is shown in green on the upper image. So the applicant is proposing to rezone only the commercial area to high density residential, as shown on the bottom image on the right side of the slide. The open space areas will remain as open space. The table on the left side of the slide compares uses allowed under the existing commercial zoning and uses that would be allowed under a high density residential zoning designation. Commercial zoning allows for things like grocery stores, retail establishments, restaurants, and offices. I do want to emphasize that these uses are currently permitted and could be built on the site today in a similar manner to the Safeway Shopping Center across the street. The proposed high-density residential zoning would allow for uses such as apartments, single-family homes, townhomes, and offices. Residential uses are not permitted under the existing commercial zoning, which is why the applicant is proposing the change. In addition to regulating uses, zoning prescribes specific development standards. The table on this slide compares key development standards for the existing commercial zoning and proposed high-density residential zoning, including setbacks and buffers from Woodburn Avenue and building height. The building height for both zoning districts is the same, but more open space is required for high-density residential zoning. Again, if the site were to develop under the existing zoning, the commercial development standards in the table would apply. And as you can see on this slide, the Reflections neighborhood is also zoned high density residential and subject to the same development standards in the table. So now that I've discussed uses and development standards pertaining to zoning, I will provide a brief overview of the applicant's proposed site plan, which is required as part of any rezoning application. The applicant is proposing approximately 125 single-family rental homes as shown on this slide. These homes are proposed to be single-story, and access is proposed from Woodburn Avenue to the north, Tangerine Road to the south, and from Rancho Vistoso Boulevard to the east via a new connector road. And the applicant will provide more detail during their presentation. So before moving on, I want to make it clear that this proposal is part of a larger Avilla rental home project. The same applicant is also proposing approximately 85 to 90 rental homes across Rancho Vistoso Boulevard on a vacant 8-acre parcel adjacent to the Safeway Shopping Center, as shown on this slide. I am bringing this up tonight because this is another proposed development in your area, and I want everyone to be aware. Both developments will have the same owner and will share a leasing office. In total, both properties will have approximately 215 rental homes. While the developments are related, staff understands that both will face unique challenges in terms of site design and neighborhood compatibility. Both parcels are being processed under separate rezoning applications. I want to emphasize that for tonight's meeting, the focus will be on the subject parcel adjacent to Woodburn Avenue and the Reflections neighborhood. A separate neighborhood meeting was conducted on November 4th for the other property, and information for both parcels can be found on ovprojects.com. So I now like to turn it over to Mr. Paul Oland from Paradigm Land Design, who is representing the applicant, to provide more detail regarding their proposal and to explain the what and why of their application. So Mr. Oland, just give me one moment. I will stop sharing my screen. All right, looks like you are unmuted.
All right, thank you, Hannah. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Well, good evening. For you, those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Oland with Paradigm Land Design, and I am representing Next Metro as the developer of this project. The next few slides provide preliminary details about the proposed neighborhood, which is all one project. Next Metro Avilla has built a reputation for developing high quality and successful single-story rental casita neighborhoods. Next Metro and Avilla neighborhoods can be found throughout the Tucson and Phoenix metro areas, and increasingly in other parts of the country due to huge demand for a quality alternative to typical single-family homes. First, I want to offer a little bit of background on Avilla and Next Metro. The leased casita neighborhood format was actually invented here in Tucson more than a decade ago, and several Avilla neighborhoods were constructed around town. You may be familiar with them. Those initial neighborhoods proved significant demand exists for this development format, and they're good examples of how these neighborhoods make good neighbors because they're quiet, well-managed, single-story, and typically populated by professionals who could afford to purchase a home, but have decided to rent instead for a variety of reasons. In recent years, though, Next Metro took over the Avilla brand and has upgraded many aspects of the neighborhoods, including architecture, interior and exterior finishes, appliances, pool area, and other amenities. These design upgrades have resulted in increased popularity of the Avilla format and even stronger rental rates. As Ms. Oden mentioned, the Avilla Rancho Vistoso project encompasses around 21 acres of currently commercially zoned land and will feature approximately 215 homes. The eastern portion of the neighborhood will occupy approximately 8 acres there you can see, north of the Safeway Shopping Center. The western portion of the neighborhood, which is the reason for tonight's meeting, will occupy roughly 13 acres between Woodburn and Tangerine, west of Rancho Vistoso Boulevard. The land is currently zoned for neighborhood commercial uses, so we're proposing to downzone it to allow development of the proposed Avilla neighborhood. The preliminary site plan features 85 to 90 casitas in the eastern portion and 125 to 130 in the western portion, again, as mentioned by Ms. Oden. An interconnected open space system runs through both halves of the neighborhood, providing easy access to the proposed amenities. In the east, a resort-style pool area is centrally located near the leasing office. A picnic area is located in the far east corner overlooking the Big Wash Valley. A series of walking paths run throughout the neighborhood, and a small dog park is located in the eastern portion. The west half of the neighborhood also features a centrally located resort-style pool, a picnic area along the wash there, a series of walking paths throughout the neighborhood, and a small dog park. Both halves will also have pedestrian connections to the nearby sidewalk system. Access to the east half will be via Rancho Vistoso Boulevard near the southern end of the parcel where the star is shown there on the map, the black star. A new loop road will be constructed from Rancho Vistoso Boulevard to Tangerine, and a traffic signal is proposed to be constructed where that loop road intersects Rancho Vistoso Boulevard at the northern Safeway entrance, again, where the star is shown. Incidentally, when the Rancho Vistoso master plan was designed back in the 1980s, it identified a number of potential traffic signal locations, one of which was at Woodburn and Vistoso Boulevard. But for whatever reason, the Horizons neighborhood was actually built roughly 45 feet south of where it should have been, making it impossible to construct a full four-way signalized intersection at Woodburn there. The reliever road that Oro Valley built south of Safeway to Tangerine has taken some of the burden off of the northern Safeway access drive, but it remains an awkward intersection. So installing a signal there should clean that up and improve overall circulation. I should note that any public roadway improvements, including a signal, must first be reviewed and approved by the town to ensure that they're technically warranted and designed to meet all the applicable codes and standards. The loop road will also provide better access to the remaining commercial pads west of Vistoso Boulevard, as well as a short bypass for anyone heading south on Vistoso Boulevard who might then want to head west on Tangerine. Now, I know traffic congestion is a significant concern that many folks have. And as part of our rezoning, we are preparing a detailed traffic study to analyze the existing traffic conditions and model the anticipated impacts of these new homes. That said, it's important to keep in mind that the main roads within Rancho Vistoso were designed and built to accommodate approximately 14,000 homes. But now that all of the residential parcels in Rancho Vistoso have been developed, we find ourselves at only about 2/3 of that planned population. In other words, the roads were designed to handle many more homes than they will ever have to handle. And of course, the roads were also designed to handle the anticipated traffic from the PAD's commercial parcels. But Avila's typical demographics result in fewer vehicular trips per day than an equivalently sized commercial development. So this proposal would actually reduce the number of cars on the road compared to if these parcels were developed as currently zoned. We're still working through preliminary engineering, of course, but initial feedback from our engineer indicates that elevations will be lowered for most of the eastern half of the neighborhood, meaning that together with the one-story limit on all the homes, impacts to mountain views from neighboring homes will be minimal or non-existent. Woodburn separates the west half from nearby homes, and the terrain of both halves naturally falls from north to south away from existing properties. And again, the whole Avilla project is single story, so no impacts to view sheds will occur. Now, many people have some preconceived notions about rental homes, and many of which are well-founded, but most of which are less than accurate in higher value areas like Oro Valley. Typical demographics for Avila's leased home neighborhoods show a difference. For example, most residents could easily afford to purchase a home, but have made a conscious choice to live at Avila. Typically, well over half of the residents are more than 45 years old, many of whom are already empty nesters. More than half are typically single, and roughly half move to Avila from standard typical single family homes. More than half have household incomes between 50 and 100,000, and a little more than a quarter have incomes from 100 to 200 grand. Now, only about 15% of them have kids, which equates to around 17 school-age kids per 100 homes. For comparison, that's just about half as many kids as would be found in a typical single-family neighborhood. That statistic, combined with the relatively high percentages of single folks and empty nesters, translates into a much lower than average number of cars on site and resulting traffic volume. Again, the traffic generated by Avila will be notably less than if the property was developed commercially under its existing zoning. The average leases are 28 months, and there are no leases less than a year. Next Metro does not tolerate crime or drugs. Residents' lease contracts include a provision that a single violation by a member of their household or a guest is grounds for termination of the lease. And that includes medical marijuana, because Next Metro abides by federal law on that matter. And all prospective residents undergo a background check before acceptance. No felons are allowed, unlike in typical single-family neighborhoods. I should note that women typically make up the majority of Avila residents, in part because it is a very safe environment. Roughly 60% of the homes will be detached 2- and 3-bedroom floor plans. The remainder will be 1-bedroom floor plans, which are attached as shown here. Again, all homes in this neighborhood will be single story. This is a preliminary architectural elevation for one of the 2-bedroom homes. Within the neighborhood, there will be a variety of architectural treatments, all per the design guidelines of the Rancho Vistoso PAD, just like all the surrounding neighborhoods. This is a typical interior. Again, quality finishes are used throughout. Stainless steel appliances and plumbing fixtures, designer flooring, bright, clean spaces with high ceilings, granite countertops. This is another interior view showing a typical bright and open floor plan. In one of the many emails I've received from neighbors, someone inquired about rental rates. So I looked into that in the surrounding area. In the Rancho Vistoso neighborhoods near the property, rental homes typically rent for around $1 to $1.15 a square foot per month. So a 2,000 square foot home would typically rent for around $2,000 to $2,300 a month. Regionally, that's very strong. Of course, that's not surprising in Oro Valley, but this Avilla neighborhood will feature residences ranging in size from around 700 square feet for the 1-bedroom to a little under 1,300 square feet for the 3-bedroom. Rents are targeted at roughly $1,600 to $2,200 a month, which equates to a per square foot rate of around $1.75 to $2.30. What that means is that a typical Avilla resident can afford strong rental rates that are quite a bit higher per square foot than typical single family rental homes nearby. And the reason they're willing to pay the premium is because of the amenities, security, and maintenance-free atmosphere they'll experience while living at Avilla. This is an outdoor picnic area with stainless steel grills, seating, and fans under a shade trellis. Again, the aesthetics are very important to establish and maintain high resident satisfaction and high overall neighborhood value. This is a pool area from another Avilla neighborhood. The folks who live at Avilla demand a high level of care be applied when designing and maintaining the open space amenities serving the neighborhood. I appreciate your time. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. I will share my screen. I'm just gonna go over a few last things before we start questions and comments. All right, so moving on, as part of any rezoning application, there are key elements of staff review. So general plan conformance is a key review component. The proposed high-density residential zoning is allowed under the existing neighborhood commercial office land use identified in the Your Voice, Our Future general plan. So because of this, the application does not require a general plan amendment, but the application will be reviewed for conformance with the goals and policies in the general plan. Staff will also be reviewing for compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood and development, reviewing for any grading and drainage impacts, and reviewing for compliance with zoning code standards. In regard to traffic, a traffic impact analysis is required to be submitted by the applicant and will be thoroughly reviewed by town staff to determine potential traffic impacts and appropriate mitigation measures. So before we get started with your questions, I'd like to explain how to participate. So if you wish to speak, you'll want to use the raise your hand function in Zoom. And now there are 2 ways to do this. So if you're calling in by phone, you'll want to press *9 to raise your hand. And please note that you may also need to unmute yourself by pressing *6 and use the passcode 066328 to speak, and all that information is on the upper right portion of this slide. So for those participating on the Zoom app or website, you'll want to click on the participants icon to open a dialog box, and you should find the option to raise your hand as shown on this slide. Alternatively, you may need to click the more icon if it is available. So you should see a button labeled reactions, and by clicking this, you'll have the option to raise your hand. Now, raised hands are moved to the top of the list in the order in which they are raised. So if you're having any technical issues with Zoom or have further questions, you can contact Jessica Hind at any time during this meeting at 520-229-4711. And please make sure that you are also not muted on your personal device and that your video is not turned off on your personal device by using the microphone and video icons shown on this slide. So we do have a lot of participants tonight, so please keep your input to no longer than 3 minutes out of fairness to all participants who wish to be heard. And I will respectfully remind folks that this guideline is needed. So with that, we'll get started with your questions and comments. So please bear with me. It may take me a minute or two to move between speakers and unmute folks. I'm also working with two different screens here, so just bear with me. So let me just stop sharing here. Get my list up. All right, and I do apologize in advance if I butcher anyone's name. And so I'll announce whose turn it is and then who's on deck next, just so that that speaker can be prepared. And also because of the number of participants tonight, if a speaker, makes the same points that you were going to, you can definitely say that you just agree or, same. But I will leave that up to you. So it looks like our first speaker is Michael Gelder, and on deck after them is Mr. Richard. And again, just please make sure that you're not muted on your end. Okay, so Mr. Gelder, I will go ahead and unmute you. All right, it looks like you are unmuted. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. It's so far been a very informative and professionally driven process, and I appreciate that as a new resident of the area. I just have a question at this point. Is the downzoning independent of the plan? I mean, could it be zoned for residential, high density residential, and then another type of development once the zoning has been changed, supersede the plan that we're hearing about now?
Sure. Yeah, I can give a little bit of information on that just from a process standpoint. So with the rezoning application, there's a site analysis that's associated with that, with a tentative development plan that's required. So that will be similar to the site plan that was shared tonight. So if that's approved by town council, anything built on the subject property must be in substantial conformance with that tentative development plan. If it's not, it opens up the process again and requires another town council approval. For example, if there's an office development that's proposed or multi-story apartment development, that would open the process again. Mr. Oland, if you have anything to add, go ahead.
Nope, you nailed it.
All right, so we'll move on. So next is Mr. Richard, and on deck after them is Patrick Clark. Okay, so Mr. Richard, I'm going to unmute you.
Okay.
All right, you're unmuted. Go ahead whenever you're ready, sir.
Okay, great. Yeah, I do appreciate this process. For Mr. Oland, I have a few questions. I'll try and outline them for you and would appreciate your response. I'd like to know who owns Next Metro. I did a little research and I found it seems like their headquarters is in Phoenix, but I'd like to know why they aren't registered with the Better Business Bureau. Secondly, could you give us a breakdown of what the company cost would be to build this project and the timetable for a break-even analysis financially? And thirdly, I'd like to know if the company is willing to legally commit to retain ownership until there would be a break-even point. In other words, if it takes 8 or 10 years to recover your total costs, is Next Metro able to give us some assurances that they would retain ownership as opposed to selling it? My last point is there is a website I did some search on called Level Set, which measures the industry for contractors. And I wondered, the score for Next Metro is at 64 out of 100 for paying contractors on time, which happens to be at the bottom 15% of the medium for companies in your industry. And I wondered if you could comment on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Richard and Mr. Oland, if you want to address those questions.
Sure. Well, those questions are all entirely out of my lane. In terms of who owns them, I'm sure that information is available on the Arizona Corporation Commission website. So just so you know, I'm a land use consultant. I deal with zoning and site plans and things like that. On this side, we don't get into the economics of the project. That's something that's not tied to the land use considerations. If the economics weren't positive, we wouldn't be here. But that's not something that I'm privy to, nor do I think it's really relevant, because what we're talking about is a land use decision. Is this a compatible land use? Is this a good transitional land use between the lower density single family homes and the commercial nearby and Tangerine Road? So from that standpoint, that's really all I have to say on that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. Mr. Richard, if you had any follow-up questions, you're welcome to hop back in the queue, and you're welcome to follow up with an email if you'd like more detail, again, to ask@orovalleyaz.gov. All right, so next in line is Patrick Clark, or that's who's up to speak. And then after them is Frank Mayfield. So Mr. Clark, I'm going to unmute you. It looks like you are unmuted.
Thank you very much. Well, with kind of your statement right there, Mr. Oland, I don't know if what I'm going to say is going to apply much, because you kind of just said I'm only dealing with this and I don't get why this impacts that. I'd also like to remind all the residents, it appears as Mr. Oland is a consultant of the actual company. So they've sent not an actual employee to talk to us, but a consultant. I'm just going to read this off and you can react if you want. My name is Patrick Clark. I'm a resident of Oro Valley since May of this year. I'm a clinical social worker who provides mental health services to our nation's veterans. When my family and I moved here, we moved from Flint, Michigan, okay, where I learned to be civically involved with my government because we had a water crisis that ensured when we didn't keep our eye on things. I live in the Reflection subdivision, specifically on New Dawn Avenue, which would sit directly across the street from this proposed new rental development. My first concern has to be the impact of the increase in residents, automobiles, and traffic. It's already of traffic concerns, especially now during snowbird season. This development is going to have 215 total units between the east and west if it gets through. We can be nice and say that most households have 2 cars. That's putting 430 more cars on the road during peak traffic times. You also have to think about the other extra traffic. I'm talking about the food delivery services such as DoorDash. You're going to have the Amazons running around, general shopping needs. That's going to bring in much more traffic to that area. And mainly it's going to congest Woodburn even more. Woodburn on that curve is dangerous. There already should, that place scares me every day when I pull out of New Dawn, left or right, onto Woodburn. And I can't imagine adding more cars to that curve. It's going to increase traffic accidents. Another concern I have, and I know we're just specifically supposed to talk about the development on our side tonight, but it has to be on the logistics of that access road by the Safeway development. I wasn't there for that meeting with that neighborhood, but that seems wonky. And unless there's major infrastructure rebuilding going on, I don't see how that safely can happen there. And finally, it's about the renting. You know, we can try to spin it as much as we can. I know we're talking about luxury and this and that. So what you want to say is they're affluent people who are nice people. Just because you have money doesn't mean you're a good person. So I don't know who these people are. All I know is that they don't own their homes and they're not raising a family like I am with a son who's in a local school system and other families that are here for the same reason or for retirement. You know, this is going to be an influx of people. This is going to be a carnival of people coming in and coming out. That's the nature of the rental business. And especially at a time when our country needs more affordable housing options, what we don't need is more renting, gouging really. Those rental prices are insane. $2,000 is hefty. So I don't know, it seems like a cash grab. It seems like a bad use of the land. I tried looking through it in a logical lens. I cannot see justification for rezoning this property, on top of what I've learned tonight as well from Mr. Oland when it talks about, oh, there will be less kids here. Well, I have a family here. I'd like more kids here. You talked about how you don't allow cannabis use. If you're going to be in Arizona, abide by Arizona law because it's legal recreationally and medicinally. And just so you know, alcohol actually has more impact on society than cannabis. So with all this said, this has done nothing but push me more in the camp that this is a bad development for the Rancho Vistoso area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, for those comments. Mr. Oland, if you wanted to address some of those, including traffic and maybe the availability of housing.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Oden. So, the traffic, as I said during my presentation, I know that's a huge concern. And there's an existing concern there, regardless of what happens with these properties at the northern Safeway access point in particular. And that's why the traffic engineers are busy studying this whole area, Woodburn, Vistoso Boulevard, this proposed connector road, the Safeway reliever connection to Tangerine and Tangerine itself, to try and figure out what could be done as part of this development to not just mitigate the impacts, but to actually bring an improvement. And I understand we heard it at the neighborhood meeting for the east portion as well, that there's some significant traffic concerns, and that's one of the big hurdles we have, is to get through that analysis, not just with the traffic engineer, but then work through with the town what would be some good solutions. So, and those, whatever happens in terms of traffic improvements, well, as I said, need to be supported by code and standards and approved by the town. In terms of access to Woodburn, we would be happy not to access Woodburn. We're comfortable accessing Vistoso Boulevard and Tangerine. In terms of the availability of housing, the Oro Valley General Plan talks about providing a full spectrum of housing options. We've heard from the Oro Valley Hospital and some other of Oro Valley's most important employers that they have a significant need expressed by their employers for more housing options and more housing, period. This is a format that provides a safe and quality alternative that's more flexible than home ownership. And it fits a need. The rental rates that you mentioned, that you said were insane and gouging, those are market rates, and it's extremely expensive to build anything nowadays. Land prices are high, but construction prices are higher, and the rental rates that come out of developments like this, and the rental rates that come out of single-family homes are a function of the cost of owning those assets. So they are market rate. There's strong demand. There's lots of people who gladly pay and decide to move into a place like Avilla rather than purchasing a home. Most of the people who live in these could purchase a home and decide not to. So you made a comment about just because you have money doesn't make you a good person. I'm not even going to touch that because these are people who want to live in Oro Valley just like everybody on the call. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oland. And I will briefly point out as well that if you weren't able to attend the November 4th neighborhood meeting for the parcel next to the Safeway Shopping Center, there is a recording of that meeting online at ovprojects.com. And I do anticipate more concerns and questions over traffic tonight. So I'm actually going to turn it over right now to our permitting division manager, Mr. David Laws. to maybe just follow up on any traffic issues that may also preempt further questions tonight. So Mr. Laws, I will unmute you.
All right, thanks, Hannah. So a couple of things I think mentioned several times by Paul is first of all, they will be doing a traffic study. That study is done independently by their traffic engineer and reviewed by town staff. We've got engineers on staff. I'm an engineer. We will do a technical analysis of that. In regards to the Woodburn intersection, the town is obviously very aware of that. The way that intersection area operates. One of the reasons why that connection to Tangerine was made from the Safeway parking lot to help alleviate some of that traffic. Over the years, there's been multiple studies done for that area. So with this project, there's a definite opportunity for an improvement. That traffic signal, if warranted, does provide a benefit to this area, not just for this project, but for all the area residents for access into and out of Safeway. The one thing I did want to also point out is typically this type of development generates less traffic than you would see, definitely less than a commercial development and typically less than a typical single family residential subdivision. So the comment about, these types of units having 2 cars per unit and therefore generating 400 cars or so per peak hour is not accurate. It's certainly going to be less than that. That analysis will happen with the traffic study based on typical numbers for this type of development, which staff will review.
All right, thank you, Mr. Laws. So we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Frank Mayfield. And then on deck after them is looks like JL. So Frank Mayfield, I will go ahead and ask to unmute you. And if anyone does want their video on when they're speaking, just let me know if you can't turn it on your end. So looks like you are unmuted, sir, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I have a few thoughts I'd like to share. As you travel through our community, it's obvious that there is a new housing boom. Many new homes are currently under construction along First Avenue, Rancho, Vistoso Boulevard, La Cañada, Tangerine Road, Oracle Road, and so forth. Everywhere you turn, there is evidence of new growth in our population and an explosion in new home builds. There's no lack of new home builds. Now, we have yet to see or experience the effects on our lives, our homes, our community from the current proliferation of new home builds, which are already in progress. However, we have all already experienced the increase in traffic, density, congestion, and increase in accidents. Water, drainage, noise, and air pollution are already legitimate issues and concerns. Speculators seize the opportunity to increase their profits by requesting variances, which would allow a significant increase in high-density housing, this being adjacent to already existing high-density housing. I believe their claim that granting this variance would reduce traffic compared to commercial development. In their words, it's less than accurate. This proposed variance would reduce the amount of land available to develop commercially, reduce the opportunity for our community to enjoy more dining, entertainment, professional services, and shopping options, all of which help to make a vibrant community. Developers come and go. However, at the end of the day, the homeowners and residents of our community are left to experience the negative effects of aggressive overdevelopment. It is important that our elected officials and the town staff listen, hear, and understand that those of us on this call and many others stand united against the proposed variance request brought before the board. Thank you.
All right, no, thank you, sir, very much for those comments. And any, the neighborhood meeting summary for this meeting, any meeting that's held for these proposals, as well as any comments that we receive in writing, will be forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council if and when they consider the application. So rest assured, the decision makers will have, all information and comments from the community. Mr. Oland, was there any thing that you wanted to address from those comments?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Oden. Just a couple of points. Basically, the comment about overdevelopment and the comment about commercial development potential. First of all, in terms of overdevelopment, as I mentioned, Rancho Vistoso was designed to include many thousands more homes than it will. There's very little land left in Oro Valley anywhere to develop residentially. But all the infrastructure in Rancho Vistoso was designed to handle the anticipated number of homes. So it may feel like there's a lot of traffic. It's not what it was designed to be. It's less than what it was designed to be. But again, we'll be doing the traffic impact analysis that'll be reviewed by the town to make sure that this project improves the situation. But kind of piggybacking on that, in terms of the commercial development potential, these two properties have been zoned for commercial use for over 30 years, including the possibility of research and development uses, which were added a year or two ago by town council to all of the C1 land in Oro Valley. C1 Oro Valley, C1 Rancho Vistoso are very similar. And despite being zoned for commercial office R&D uses for 3 decades, there's never been any interest in that. And the reason is very clear, and that is because there aren't enough residents to support that level of commercial. There's 80 acres of commercial land at this intersection. A fraction of it is developed, and what is developed, some of it's doing okay, some of it's not doing very well. There's finished shell space in the retail shell space in the shopping center on the southwest corner that's been built for over a decade, and it's never ever been leased. And I guarantee you that's not because the owner hasn't tried. There's not enough demand. There have been studies that prove that, and we will bring that kind of data to the town when we make our application. But fact of the matter is, these properties, which are commercially developed, won't develop commercially. There's just more commercial acreage than Vistoso needs, or that Oro Valley needs in this part of town, based on the number of residents.
Thank you, Mr. Oland. So we'll move on here. We still have a number of speakers. So just a reminder to folks, so please keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. So next, or on deck, or right now, I will unmute JL, and then on deck after them is Caleb. All right, so JL, looks like you are unmuted.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to first say thank you to Patrick and Frank. You hit on a lot of key items that I actually did want to bring up and had questions on. I have lived in the Reflections area for the past 4 years, so I am actually off of North New Dawn and directly impacted by this proposal. I've lived in Oro Valley for over 20 years, not just from here, but also in the Ransfield Pass area, which had a meeting discussing development for the Oro Valley Marketplace. So I attended that as well. So I do know that you had mentioned that the Oro Valley Hospital staff were, complaining about not having enough residential areas. So I know for a fact that that development is planning on, adding several residential areas to that area, which is, just a short minute drive away from here. There's, as I forget if it was Patrick or Frank already mentioned, a number that basically that whole strip on First Avenue getting developed. So I agree that there's not a lack of housing. There is definitely a lot of development, and due to all of that development recently, we've had a number of, or rather an increase in the wildlife coming into the neighborhood. We've had, can't even tell you how many times I've heard coyotes attacking dogs in the neighborhood, and that's all because of all this development. So one of my questions is, how is this beneficial to us? As someone that does live on New Dawn and has to deal with the traffic, it is a very dangerous road. So if there is going to be a traffic survey, I am actually very interested to know what you got, if there's going to be any plan on addressing the safety on Woodburn, because you could look away for a millisecond and there's a car that comes around the corner, zipping around the corner. So I don't know how we can address that, but that's a huge concern, especially if you're going to have access for these number of homes that you're proposing to come on to Woodburn. The slide that you showed proposing putting a light like a second after you bypass First, right there by the Safeway, I don't see how that would be beneficial. The larger traffic area would be Woodburn. And for anybody that lives in this neighborhood knows it is a pain in the butt to try and get in and out of the neighborhood right there. So having an intersection further down, I don't think makes any logical sense. If you are putting a light there, my other concern is that there be sensors so that you're not backing up the traffic even more. And I know I've heard from somebody at the other meetings that the lights are censored, but they're not. I'm sorry, they're not. I don't know what is done, but they're not censored. My other concern is light. So a big part of living up in Oro Valley is that we can see the stars and we don't have a flood of lights. Right now, with that being a desert section, no development, it's great. We can walk at night, see some stars, see the wide open view. So putting, that housing there, even if it's single story, you're still blocking the mountain views. You're still taking away a view. And that's going to be increasing light. So if it's going to be a rental property, what is the light situation? Are we going to have floodlights up? And I saw in your
ma'am,
illustration.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but if you could just wrap up
Yep.
over your 3 minutes, we just still have a lot of speakers.
I'm so sorry. My
no
last comment is that the amenities that you're putting there, I felt that was a little like, I don't care because we don't live there. So if you are putting amenities there, like units, I can't think of it right now, but it looked like in that drawing, it was a two-story amenity building by the pool. So how is that going to affect us as well?
All right, thank you. And very much for those questions and comments. So Mr. Rowland, if you want to address, the benefits of the community, I know we touched on traffic already, light pollution,
Yep.
Those types of concerns.
Sure, thank you. So as far as the traffic signal location, as I mentioned, the traffic study is including Woodburn, Rancho Vistoso, including all of the roads around here and all of the intersections. They're all part of that analysis. And so the best place for a signal, if a signal is warranted, will be determined in that study. And that's something that, as I said, we'll be working through very closely with town staff. In terms of the dark skies concerns, this project will be subject to the dark skies requirements, just like all other new developments in Oro Valley. So there's strict rules in terms of light spillage and things like that. But again, they'll be held to the same standards as everybody else. And then in terms of the amenities, I wasn't. You said you don't care what the amenities are in here. I was just listing those as part of the project as project information. So But again, that's neither here nor there. But I know the big concern is traffic, and we will be digging into that.
Thank you, Mr. Olin. Is there anything you wanted to add about just the availability of housing?
Nothing more than I said before. I mean, this is a sector of the housing market that is needed in Oro Valley. It's a demonstrated need, and this will be filling that need.
Great, thank you, Mr. Olin. The speaker now is Caleb, followed by Wayne Iger or Ilger. Again, apologize if I mispronounced that, but Caleb, I will unmute you.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, I apologize. I didn't realize I was logged on as my son who was doing school on Zoom earlier. I apologize. Thank you for those of you who have spoken already. A lot of the things that I was going to address have already been talked about. I was specifically wondering, and I know traffic study needs to be done, but with the signal light there, how are we addressing the backup of traffic onto Woodburn? Because right now already the Tangerine light backs up quite a ways as you're turning off of Woodburn. And so with having that signal light from everyone coming down first, going towards Tangerine, how are we going to address that backup that would end up blocking the Woodburn exit of the neighborhood? And we as well live on Newton Avenue, and I would just, yes, again, agree with all that has been said about bringing more traffic, especially in an intersection right there across from Newton. I think would be we'd see an increase in accidents just because of the nature of the road at that spot. And also, I also agree. What is the plan as far as land use? Are we going to have some type of nature study? I don't know what the technical term is for the wildlife that we have, because it seems to be a corridor that comes down our wash and goes into that area. What are we doing to really look at the wildlife that is in that area already, and where will they be pushed if we develop that with high density housing? My last question is, with it being called high density housing, could it easily be changed into a different type of high density housing if Avilla sells to a different company that owns it? Can it be changed? Can the use of it be changed after it's built to a different type of housing?
All right. No, thank you very much for those questions and comments. So I can hit a couple of those points. So to your most recent question about the change of the type of development. So I think I mentioned at the very beginning of the question and comment period, but the tentative development plan, which is the site plan that accompanies a rezoning application. If this proposal is approved by council, anything built on the site must be in substantial conformance to what has been, proposed to the neighbors and approved by town council. If something different is proposed, such as offices or multi-story apartments, things that are allowed under the the zoning, but it's just a different product, that will open the process again and require town council approval. And as far as any environmental impacts, the rezoning application requires a very extensive and thorough site analysis. So with that, we look at impacts to vegetation, wildlife. We actually require a site resource inventory, which will identify any significant vegetation. So that will all be looked at and covered pretty extensively during the rezoning site analysis. But Mr. Oland, if you wanted to address the backup of traffic with that signal.
Well, I don't have a whole lot more to add on traffic. It will be studied very significantly here. As I said, the traffic engineers are preparing a report that town staff is going to review, and I'm sure that town staff will not be in favor of any design that involves backing up traffic through an intersection. I do want to just touch though on the question about wildlife too. Briefly, and just taking a step back, the Rancho Vistoso PAD, which was designed and approved in the 80s, is thousands and thousands of acres. It was I think Miss Oden had that in one of her slides. And at that point, the washes and the vegetation and the wildlife corridors were studied. And the most important ones, honeybee wash, big wash, and then the tributary washes, such as the one that run through this parcel and the parcel to the north, were all set aside as open space. So of the entire Rancho Vistoso PAD, about half of it, 50%, is actually preserved as open space. It may not feel like that driving down the road, but that's because the development parcels are against the roads. But the fact of the matter is that within Vistoso, half of that master plan was set aside. But then zooming in on this particular parcel, that wash area, which is the primary wildlife corridor, which was identified years ago in the PAD, that's still being set aside. You see there's a green, a big green swath running through the site plan, and that is that PAD open space that's being preserved. The last thing I would add is that the current commercial zoning requires 10% open space. That's what the zoning says today on both of these parcels. But what we're proposing, the HDR zoning in the PAD, requires 30% open space. So this will actually result in more on-site open space than if it was developed under the commercial zoning.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. So moving on, we have Wayne Ilger, who is on deck now, and then after them is Heather and Rick. And again, please keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. Hands keep popping up, so definitely want to get to everyone this evening. So Wayne, I just asked to unmute you. Okay, looks like you are unmuted.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks, guys. Hannah, this is, if I might ask, could you pull the map up again so we can all see it? Because I have questions I want to ask of Paul relative to that map. And Paul, I might say that I am a consultant as well, and I know that what you're doing is certainly challenging, and I appreciate your candor.
I'm sorry, which map was it? Was it the site plan?
Yeah, this map will be fine.
Okay.
So, or the one with the star might be better, just as a reflection of what Paul.
Oh, this one here.
Is, yeah, where's the mark with the star on it, proposed intersection?
That was in my presentation.
Oh, my apologies. Let me stop sharing this, and Paul, let me make sure that you can share your screen. Okay.
All right, got it. All right, should be up now.
Perfect, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So the neighborhood I live in, and a lot of us live in, runs along Woodburn Avenue, and many of us, most of us, take a right there. And so it's not clear to me, Paul, and you can address this directly, we don't have to wait. It's not clear to me how people on Woodburn with the new development and the commercial will be able to take a right without the traffic backing up onto Rancho Vistoso. And then we'd just be sitting there. And I must say, without any new developments, we already just sit there in the morning. And having been here for 15 years in this house, your project won't be allowed to impact our quality of life or our ability to get out of the neighborhood. And so I think that's just a fact. I don't see how that light would work. You might propose a third light, but that becomes just ridiculous. And then we'll be sitting here no matter what in any case.
Yeah.
And so, Paul, I don't have any clue how this can work traffic wise, and engineers are fine, but as a practical matter, having lived here for years, adding in cars from houses, adding in cars from commercial, it just seems wacko. Paul, were you involved some years ago when a proposal was made to develop this property and it was rejected?
You know, I've been involved in several proposals on this property. Obviously, none of them have gone through. The one I'm thinking of was actually just withdrawn by the developer because it was a multi-story apartment complex that was too much of a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
Not sure if that's
Yeah.
the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and if I might suggest, I can't imagine anybody on this call or anybody that would join a session with the city council would approve of this. And I'm sorry to say that, but I think this is the way the roads have worked, the way the population have worked. I just don't see it going. And so with that as a suggestion for Hannah and for Paul and for the people that are listening here, I might think that a possibility here would be for the owner of the land to condemn it, take it as a tax write-off, and the city to turn it into a park. Problem solved. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne, for those comments and questions. So Paul, was there anything else that you wanted to add to traffic?
Yeah, just that I'm hearing Woodburn over and over again, and I think I said before we'd be happy to remove that Woodburn access point if it helps the overall circulation and helps find a solution to to some of the existing problems, as well as mitigating what what we would be doing. But the issue of Woodburn has been on the table for a long time. There have been many proposals. There was one that actually had Woodburn getting realigned down through this property and connecting at the Safeway Northern entrance. That was about 10 years ago. There was another one that would have shifted Woodburn south about 50 feet so that a signal could be put at that intersection. But the point is, it's been on the radar for a long time that there are traffic issues in this area that aren't so much about volume, but more about circulation. And that's something that we, as I said, we'll be digging into that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. So next is Heather and Rick, and on deck after them is Jimmy Chavez. So Heather and Rick, I will unmute you. All right, looks like you are unmuted.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to approach this a little differently. I believe I heard that the rents are going to reflect $1.75 per square foot. If that was the case, you've got 700 square foot units, and at $1.75 a square foot, that's $1,225 a month that is going to be the rent. Now, one of the points that was made specifically was indicating that the rents are going to be high enough for that to be a limiting factor as to the quality of individuals that live there. Another statement I heard was that background checks are going to be made to ensure the right kind of people are there. Now, having been in real estate for a number of years and knowing the requirements of most states and cities regarding tenancy and who can apply and who can restrict what kinds of individuals from various projects, that doesn't quite square with what I call reality. And I think that it's not going to be as limiting. Now, if in fact, there's going to be a minimum of $2,000 a month spent for the smaller housing units, that means they're going to be paying $2.86 a square foot for something that's probably no bigger than a military housing unit that we had when I was in the military. This efficiency apartment that really has 2 rooms. And so that doesn't set well with me. Another statement that was made was that the hospital is having a great deal of difficulty finding places for, and I'm presuming that it's more for the visiting medical staff than for the permanent staff to be housed. Having known and still know people that have Airbnb properties in Rancho Vistoso, who have reached out to the hospital in vain for them to pass on such information to their incoming employees, that's a red herring. That doesn't meet reality. So those are my comments and concerns.
Great. Thank you very much for those comments, sir. Mr. Oland, was there anything you wanted to address?
Sure, Ms. Oden, thank you. Well, there were some paraphrases in there of what I said, but I want to clarify some things. First of all, the rent numbers that you were quoting, those aren't the ones I gave, and they're not accurate. But the rents are what they are, and in terms of the individuals who typically live in Avilla, I never made any statements about the goodness of those people. I think that came from another speaker in the neighborhood. These are normal people like everybody on the call who want to live in Oro Valley. I have no idea why there would be an issue between employers and Airbnbs. That's easy information to get, but we can supply letters from some of Oro Valley's employers stating the facts that I stated before, that there is a need for this type of housing. I would also add, just on the topic of real estate rental and the background checks and everything, felons are not a protected class, so I'm not sure if you were insinuating any kind of discrimination there, but that not allowing felons to live in these neighborhoods is not a violation of any kind of law. And again, as I said in my presentation, that's not the case in typical single-family neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olin. So now we have Jimmy Chavez, who I will unmute, and then after them on deck is Charles Welty. Okay, Mr. Chavez, you are unmuted.
All right, thank you. Thank you for letting us speak tonight. And well, I have a lot of the same concerns as my fellow neighbors. I've been here about 16 years, and I live right across the street from this proposed project. And this is not my first rodeo. I've seen them come and go, and I have the same concerns, like the traffic, the water, the drainage, all the problems that go with any development. But in my case, and it's I have a little different twist on it. My question is, Mr. Olin, what benefit do I have from this? Is my property, the value of my property, going to go up, or is it going to hopefully not go down in a case like this where we have a high density proposal in front of us? But I just want to keep it simple. If you could answer me that question as far as my benefit as a homeowner in the surrounding area.
Sure. So couple of thoughts on that. One is just relating to the existing zoning. I know right now it's vacant, and a lot of people see that as open space, but it's not open space. It's private property that's zoned for commercial development. And that carries with it a whole long list of things that could potentially be there that I think would have a negative impact on some of the property values in very close proximity to this. The commercial zoning also allows for a 3-story building, for example. I'm not throwing that out there as a threat, but I'm throwing it out there as a question mark that exists on both of these properties today and has existed for a long time. People who live next to these properties have been living next to commercially zoned land, not open space. And so what we're proposing here from a land use standpoint is a good transitional land use. It's residential, it's quiet, it's single story. It locks in a use that is a much better neighbor than a commercial development. So that is a benefit there, eliminating that unknown. The other benefit is that, as I said before, the PAD, the Rancho Vistoso PAD, was underdeveloped for residential, which means that it was overplanned for commercial. And the result of that is commercial land that is underutilized. It means that commercial development that has occurred is not as strong as it could be. And bringing in some additional rooftops will help local employers. It will help local businesses thrive, and it should actually lead to business growth, bringing in more of the restaurants and things like that people want. Right now, as I said, there are many acres of undeveloped commercial land here. And if there was a demand for restaurants and entertainment uses to come into the area, nothing has ever stopped them. But they haven't come in. And the reason for that is a density question. So this will protect the properties around it from the commercial potential that exists on them today, and it will help local businesses.
Thank you, Mr. Oland, Mr. Chavez. So next we have Charles Welty, and then on deck after them is Rana, Pat, and Carter.
Hi, thank you for taking my questions, and hi to all my neighbors on North New Dawn. I had a question regarding along the lines of what Jimmy mentioned. Apparently this new development, this proposed development, is going to be privately managed and there will be no HOA involved. How is a private management company going to maintain the quality of the neighborhoods that we have here in Reflections? That's my first question. My second one is regarding the new development that's already gone up. I believe it's up off of North Rancho Vistoso Boulevard going down into Big Wash. Have those traffic numbers been tabulated or formulated into your projections? And my last question has to do with the vacancy rates. My numbers show that there's a 7% rental vacancy rate in Oro Valley. So I want to know where you're getting your numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those questions. Mr. Oland, if you want to address the management, the traffic, and then the vacancy. Those are the three things I had.
Sure. Thank you. Just taking notes. Sorry. So the first question there in terms of the private management. And the question that followed it was, what's the guarantee of quality? Well, I can tell you that as a development, just like a home or a shopping center or any other piece of real estate, the owner is incentivized to keep the quality as high as possible because that translates directly into the value of the property. When the management company manages the Avilla neighborhood, the next metro neighborhood, the idea is to keep the quality as high as possible because the idea is not to let rents drop. The idea is to keep the property as a real estate asset as high as possible because in Oro Valley, land values are already very high. So the guarantee of quality is basically similar to any other piece of real estate. You as a homeowner, you want your home not to lose value. As a owner of this project, they don't want their project to lose value. It's exactly the same principle with the same motivation. In terms of vacancy rates, I don't have those numbers. I don't believe I gave a specific vacancy rate, but they are low. And there is, as I mentioned, there is demand for this sort of development. We can certainly provide some vacancy rates, but I don't have those at my fingertips. And then the other question was, is traffic from the Pulte and Mattamy subdivisions along Moore Road down in Big Wash, is that being factored into this report? And the answer is yes. So traffic reports have to take into account existing traffic conditions, and that's taken actual counts out on the road to see how many there are. And if there is development that is currently under construction, there's an allowance added in for that because everyone knows it's coming. So that will be incorporated into that analysis.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. So next we have Rana Patton Carter, followed by Thomas Costello.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, this is Rana, and I would like to thank everyone for this forum. Very insightful comments. I have thoughts that my primary and my husband's primary concern is the density as it pertains to traffic. That seems to be the overwhelming concern. I will say that our concern is what this will do to the density of traffic from Woodbridge to Rancho Vistoso down to Tangerine. It could be just very difficult. And I hear respectfully, Mr. Olin, that there will be studies made, but I want to share that I have heard many times tonight that Rancho Vistoso's planning was designed in 1980, 40 years ago. What is similar now to what we thought 40 years ago in our lives? It has changed so much relative to traffic, water consumption, wildlife. I in no means wish to disrespect the planning, but to say it was forecast 40 years ago, I just don't know. I would love to hear from other people on this panel. What in our lives is like it is now, what we thought it would be 40 years ago, relative to utilities, density, everything. So I don't have anything I would like a response to. I do appreciate the thoughtful input from Mr. Olin and the panel. I very much worry about the density of traffic. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for those comments. So now we have Thomas Costello, and on deck after them is Cynthia Carr. All right, Mr. Costello, I will unmute you.
Thank you. Can I be heard now?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give some kudos to Rana for her very observant comments this way. The space of time in 40 years is indeed extremely significant, and the planners in Oro Valley really need to pay some attention to this, I would think. I've been a resident of the area for about the past 20 years. And I would also, what comes to mind is that this area on the north side of Tangerine, to me, is at least a wildlife pass-through, if not a wildlife corridor. And I see on the plan that there are some type of easements off of the north side of Tangerine. I'm curious as to how large that is as far as its width is concerned, and what types of preparation or what type of thought has been put into that by the developer to assist, if you will, the dwindling wildlife. And I'm going to say dwindling because it definitely is. And also, I would like to address these two roads that I see. One coming, one on the western side of this development, and the other on the eastern side, closer to First Avenue. How is this going to impact the already, I would say, river of traffic that is on Tangerine right now? I think Tangerine was, when it was redeveloped 10 years ago or so, It was meant to be kind of a boulevard. No longer is it a boulevard. It's more or less like a minor freeway in my estimation. Also, if one takes a look at the new developments down there on North First Avenue, the traffic is definitely increased. The people exiting that development are let's say it is no longer near as safe coming up that road as it was previously. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for those comments. Mr. Olin, did you want to respond? Anything additional with traffic or wildlife? And we provide some more detailed information, I think, on the southern part of the development.
So yeah, thank you. Not really on traffic. We've kind of beat that issue as far as we can tonight without the results of the study. Which even if nothing happens on these parcels yet, that study will still be very useful to the town in understanding better what'll what the issues are in this area. So that said, I do want to just talk about the comment was made basically, why is a 40-year-old plan relevant? And from a land use standpoint, the Rancho Vistoso PAD has been an extremely successful master plan. If you look at master plans all over the state of Arizona, oftentimes they start out with a plan, and then what ends up getting built is not terribly similar to what was planned. The Rancho Vistoso PAD, by contrast, has followed the plan very closely. The biggest difference has been the underdevelopment of it. For example, the Horizons neighborhood north of the eastern portion of Avilla here, that's zoned for apartments. Most of the developments up and down Rancho Vistoso Boulevard are zoned for 3-story apartments. That was the plan. Now, to Ms. Patton Carter's comment, things change, and that's exactly right. Things do change. Those parcels and many others in Rancho Vistoso didn't follow the original plan, although certainly all of the open space and wildlife corridors that were part of that 40-year-old plan had been preserved. But many of the parcels along Rancho Vistoso Boulevard did not develop at anywhere near their planned density. And so things do change, and this is part of it. We're now proposing to adjust the amount of commercial that's provided for the residents in the area, because it's just not as much acreage is needed. More residents are needed to support the commercial that's there. So things do change, and like I said, this is part of it. The last thing I would add is just that Tangerine, I think Mr. Costello, you referred to it as a minor freeway. I don't disagree with you. In fact, it was owned by ADOT until very recently. Tangerine was planned to be a state route connecting Tangerine to connecting Oracle to I-10. If you notice how much land is on this map between Tangerine and the nearby developments, that's because the area that was designated for a road flared out, because originally grade separated interchanges were planned. That's why this intersection is so far away from the development that's nearby it. That's obviously never going to happen. And ADOT doesn't own the road anymore. They gave it back to Oro Valley recently. So things do change. And what we're proposing today is a good way to ratchet back that density that was originally planned and support the commercial that's left.
Thank you, Mr. Olin. So we do still have a lot of speakers left. We're just about at 7:30. So with the group's permission, we'll keep going for a little bit and just try and get through as many speakers as we can, because definitely want to give everyone an opportunity to speak and ask a question. So right now, let's see, 1 second here. So Cynthia Carr, I will unmute you, and on deck for you is Mark Middlestat.
Thank
Cynthia,
you.
looks like we're unmuted.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and actually just the recent discussion about the zoning and changes has kind of addressed some of my questions and concerns, but I've heard this, I've personally been impacted by rezoning multiple times. I've lived in Sacramento Canyon and got notice about rezoning right by my home there. Then we moved into Echo Valley and Horizons, got notice about rezoning that went through and changed there right by our home. And now again, and this has come up multiple times here. It's been really frustrating that you buy a home with a certain expectation of what's going to be around you for the zoning, and then it doesn't stick to the plan. It's constantly being changed, and every time it's been changed to high density or medium high density. So I'm hearing this discussion about, oh, there's this need, you know, the hospital sent a letter, so it's been great. But whether it's appropriate to address that need with high density in this location, which is clearly a problem spot that many people have a lot of concerns about, because it is the bottleneck entrance in and out of this master plan community. Some people can use that, you know, northern intersection coming in and out of Oracle on the north side of Rancho Vistoso, but the reality is the majority of people probably come through this very intersection because it's the more direct and faster route to everything south of here, which is where most people need to go all the time. And so this is a real problem spot. And so I share the concerns about the traffic issues for sure. I'm wondering about what kind of public comment period and opportunity there is for us to view that traffic analysis once it happens, and we can then comment then. And I'm wondering about how it is that I keep being told every time I go to one of these meetings that, you know, oh, you're rezoning right by my house again and making it high density. I hear that statement about, oh, the original plan, it was supposed to, this plan committee was supposed to accommodate so many more homes and it's only 2/3 capacity or whatever. And yet these rezonings have been happening and adding more and more homes and higher density all around us. And I get told that same story each time I come to these sessions. And it feels like the stats and the numbers of the information hasn't updated to the fact that now there is more homes being built in this area. So I'm really not having a lot of faith or confidence in, you know, what I'm hearing about that line that, oh, the original plan was to accommodate so much more. And yet, oh, the original plan is so outdated, it's not appropriate anymore. And it seems very misaligned to, you know, that there was a plan and, oh, it was a great plan, but now there's all this rezoning because it wasn't a great plan and whatever. So I'm just wondering, yeah, what kind of reassessment is there for the plan that was from the 80s? And is it still true that it can accommodate that volume of homes that's so much more than what there really is? You know, those are some of my questions and concerns.
All right, no, thank you, Ms. Carr, for yeah, those comments and questions. So before turning it over to Mr. Oland, as far as the traffic impact analysis that's required with the formal application, when we receive that, that will be posted on the project's webpage. So I will come in with the formal application. So I'll be posting anyone on this meeting and we'll be able to view that. All right, and Mr. Oland, did you want to address the other points that Ms. Carr brought up?
I already talked about the PAD and the long-term plan, but everybody on this call has my contact information. I would love to sit down with anybody here and go over the history of the zoning in the area, if that would help anybody understand the statements that are being made tonight, which are factually correct.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. So next is Mark Middlestat, and on deck after them is looks like Patty Estes. And again, if you, as much as you can, just you keep your comments as brief as possible, just so we make sure that we get through everyone tonight. All right, so Mr. Middlestat, it looks like you are unmuted.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the speakers and all the information that's been shared thus far. It's sort of a repeat from the one back in early November. You know, I don't want to beat the dead horse being the traffic again, but as I've carefully listened to all the conversations regarding the traffic, there's one element that is yet to be discussed, and that's the Painted Sky Elementary School right down the street. So with my family being here 20 years, we live off of Legacy or on Legacy, which is kind of just north of the green area. But traffic in the mornings from a school perspective is terrible. It backs up, no kidding, all the way to New Dawn, if not further in some instances. So you're talking school buses and drop-offs and all that kind of stuff. I just cannot see that entrance to the property off of Woodburn solving any problems at all. So the other thing is, several folks have mentioned the speed on Woodburn Avenue. When we moved here, it was 30 miles an hour. It was upgraded to 35 some time ago. And somebody called it a racetrack as well. I agree with all of those points. Mr. Olin, I think you mentioned something about the lighting for this potential community. You know, there's going to have to be lighting for safety reasons. So I don't know how you keep that to a minimum in a property of this size, but there's plenty of challenges along that line as well. So nothing really new there, but if you wanted to touch on the school traffic issues, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sure, just real quickly on the traffic issues, I totally agree with you about the Woodburn connection. I said before, we'd be happy to take that off the plan if it solves some issues. In terms of lighting, this project, as I said, will be subject to all the dark skies ordinances. It's got more open space in it than single family homes in terms of the neighborhoods. If you look at this map, you can see that the amount of open space between the homes is more. There's less building area per acre, if you will, than in a normal single family development there. So you're right, we'll have safety lighting, but nobody wants to live in a big glaring neighborhood, either north of Woodburn or south. And so the lighting will be done tastefully within code, and it won't be overblown.
Thank you, Mr. Oland. So speaking now is Patty Estes, and on deck after them is Georgia Pennington. Okay, let me unmute you, Ms. Estes. There you go. Looks like you were unmuted.
Thanks, Hannah. My name is Patty Estes. I live in the Tangerine Hills neighborhood, south of this parcel across Tangerine Road. And it is also west of the Silverhawk development that lies along First Avenue. My comments, a lot of them really are directed toward the town of Oro Valley. One, I think even at these neighborhood meetings, we should have a representative of the owners and the developers, in addition to Mr. Oland, in case they have comments that they would like to make to the neighbors of this development. We used to have other representatives, I believe, at these meetings. The other comment I have is that Oro Valley, and this is really directed toward a lot of the people who spoke earlier that lived across from the development on Woodburn. And that is just to warn you that Oro Valley won't enforce its noise ordinances while the construction is going on. And I have firsthand experience with the Silverhawk development, and I did make formal complaints about the noise, which includes noise from dumpsters being emptied at every other unit at 4 a.m., going bang, 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 bang. And that was reported, and the town passed that on to the developer, but it just was a cycle of nobody doing anything. The other thing is, you know, gravel trucks and soil trucks and backup alarms going on as early as 4 a.m. And this is multiple years. Silverhawk is being developed still, and we're having these problems. So that's just to warn people that live nearby. And And in addition, the traffic study that was done for Silverhawk showed that the traffic from that development should come out on Palisades Road, which is logical because there's a light there already. But that didn't seem to make any difference in how the circulation on Silverhawk was developed. In fact, one of the major egresses is at an unprotected intersection across from my neighborhood. So in the last few seconds, I also want to say that Tangerine has become so noisy in my neighborhood. And when it was first widened, we at least had rubberized asphalt. And I wish Oro Valley would consider that. And in addition, an ordinance that says that no Jake brakes can be used in residential areas along Tangerine Road. Thank you very much.
All right, no, thank you very much for those comments, Ms. Estes, and we'll definitely be taking those into account during staff review of this proposal. So thank you for sharing everything. So next is Georgia Pennington, and after them on deck is iPad. So it looks like you are unmuted.
Okay. Hi. I am here just because I thought that you guys needed someone to say that they support this, and I'm excited about this development, and I would live there, and I'm exactly the type of person that was talked about in the beginning presentation who would live there. I have a child. I'm a young professional, and I've lived in Oro Valley for 20 years. So I just wanted that to be known that there is someone supporting it, and that's all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pennington. So next is iPad, followed by Shelley Solomon.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I didn't want to come on an iPad. My name is Henry Blashard. I live in Overlook. And look, I'm from Jersey, so I'm going to try to cut to the point here. All right. I mean, this is the biggest boondoggle I've ever heard of. I mean, this is a property with $1 million view of the Catalina Mountains. And this guy wants to resurrect or build what I consider to be one step away from public housing. Unbelievable. All right. Now, with respect to the traffic, that's a major boondoggle. All right. It's a straw man argument. I mean, from Jersey's point of view, you can put a couple of dog legs in here and a couple of clover leaves and you can solve the traffic. But the bottom line here is, what is the land going to be used for? And this is nothing more than a bunch of low single family apartments, nothing else. And it's going to do nothing to enhance the character or the quality of life in the neighborhood or Oro Valley as a community. Now, I can go into some more specifics, and I will do that in writing. But this is unbelievable. And what further bothers me is when I came out here 4 years ago, the big thing was that the politics was so bad. We had an administration that was giving land away and building this and building that. Well, hell, we're back to where we started from again. So I see absolutely no value in this development whatsoever, except taking $1 million view. Get this, $1 million view of the Catalina Mountains and exploiting it to the maximum benefit of the developer. So thank you very much for your time. You did a great job in hosting and coordinating the meeting.
Thank you very much for those comments. Mr. Oland, do you want to touch on anything there or have any responses?
Just that I respectfully disagree with everything he just said.
All right. So moving on, next is Shelley Solomon, and on deck after them is Patrick Malloy. So Shelley, looks like you are unmuted, so whenever you are ready.
I just want to say that I've been living in Oro Valley for about 15 years, off Sterling for about 2. And we have a firehouse right up on the edge of the proposed Avilla development. And they have just basically doubled their space because they could not attend properly to all the demand that was upon them. And so now we're going to put another couple of 100 units in and quadruple the population of people in our communities and back up the roads. To me, it sounds pretty homicidal and dangerous. And I really am eager to see how you could possibly assimilate any analytic study of how this would be compatible to our safety in our homes and communities. Plus I have water concerns, but that I think that will have to be addressed at another time. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm glad that we all attended.
Thank you very much, Ms. Solomon, and thank you for attending this meeting, of course. So just real quickly, I just want to point out that Gelder Ranch Fire, they're involved throughout the entire process of this. So they were at the pre-application meeting. They'll be reviewing the proposals with the formal submittal to make sure that they're not negatively impacted and, of course, have capacity for any new development. But Mr. Rowland, is there anything else that you wanted to add based on those comments?
No, Hannah, that was what I was going to say.
All right, so next is Patrick Malloy, and then on deck after them is Lori Pettyjohn. And apologies if I butcher anyone's name, but Mr. Malloy, looks like you are unmuted.
Right, yeah, you got me on just right. Mr. Oden, Mr. Orland, thank you very much for your time. My wife and I bought our house on New Dawn back in '96, so we've seen a lot of changes come through Oro Valley in the last 25 years or so. As for the concept of single-family homes, single story, it looks good, but my biggest concern is Woodburn Avenue. The problem I have, everybody's aired, they're concerned about the traffic issue, but it's unclear to me is what the sequencing is of addressing that. Do you, Mr. Orland, submit a traffic study and then the city of Oro Valley assess your study, or does the city of Oro Valley go out and assess traffic independently and find a traffic solution for Woodburn? Because that is a treacherous blind curve as you come past New Dawn and Sterling. We've seen many close calls, and I think the worst close call I saw was the Oro Valley Police Department doing about 60 miles an hour one day on that section of Woodburn. So it is narrow there. It needs to be widened. There needs to be some concerns about the traffic. We need the traffic solution before we have an approval for a zoning change. Is that the normal sequence?
Yes. So the traffic report gets submitted with the rezoning application. So that has to be vetted and reviewed, and the solution that it proposes has to be approved by the town. And the threshold is we can't decrease the levels of service to unacceptable levels, and there's math behind all of that. I'm not a traffic engineer, but that study, which is done by another firm, a local traffic engineering firm, has to go through that whole analysis, and the town will review it. And that has to be approved before the rezoning can get approved, never mind anything getting built.
Yeah, who covers the cost of the services of this traffic engineering study? Is that something that Oro Valley pays for? Or is that something the developer pays for, or?
Developer pays for everything.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland and Mr. Malloy, for your questions and comments. So we're going to move on to Lori Pettyjohn, and after them is Cecilia Manjares. Right, Lori, it looks like you are unmuted.
Yes. Okay. With all due respect, Mr. Orland, and I know you said that the traffic thing has been, overstated, but have you ever driven like down Woodburn, Rancho Vistoso into Safeway? Because the way you guys have the two communities and where you want to put that light going into the back of Safeway, that road right there is so narrow that you literally can barely fit one car there. And you're proposing to put a whole entrance of the other community into that one, and then the new community that you're talking about into that one, is my first question. And my second one is, you said that the property line, or the proposal is 5 feet from the property line and a 15-feet buffer. Can you tell me where I don't know where the property line is. So where is that? What is that from the road of Woodburn? So the properties would be how far from the road of Woodburn and Tangerine, if that makes any sense, distance?
Sure.
Thank you.
So in terms of the distance to the road, we can do some very quick measurements, but Tangerine is very distant. We've got, I will measure real quick, and I know Miss Oden is probably not happy with me right now, but from the proposed units to Tangerine, probably about 200 feet. As I mentioned, there's a very wide right-of-way there that was originally intended to provide space for a much more significant road. And then from Woodburn, the distance from the pavement to the units, probably around, I'd say 60 to 70 feet, if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Oland and Ms. Pettyjohn for those questions. So next is Cecilia Manharis. And then we're going to, looks like our last first time speaker for the evening is RJ Mendoza 10. Will be after them. So Ms. Manharis, I'm going to unmute you. All right, looks like you were
Hello?
unmuted. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Hannah, for hosting this. And thank you, Mr. Olin, for your time. And I have a question. Has the developer, or why hasn't the developer thought of building on property that's already zoned for residentials? A residential area instead of commercial property in Oro Valley?
Sure. So the simple answer is that there really isn't very much land that's already zoned for this. In Rancho Vistoso, all the land that was zoned for this was used up with single family development. There's a few pieces here and there around Oro Valley. They're small pieces, but there just isn't land available for this sort of development. So repurposing some unneeded commercial acreage for a transitional use is an approach that I think makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Mr. Oland and Ms. Manharis, for your question. So we're going to go to RJ Mendoza 10, first time speaker for the evening. So it looks like you are unmuted.
Thank you all for hearing me out. You know, Mr. Oland, I don't mean to beat the traffic thing to death, but the only issue I have is with the traffic study is I don't know that a traffic study will tell you how. I will live on New Dawn, obviously, and you've heard from the New Dawn people how treacherous that turn is. But can you let me know, or maybe give me a little more information on how would a traffic study tell me, or be able to tell how treacherous that turn actually is? Because like everybody else stated, it's really a blind left-hand turn, and you're really going up basically on blind faith on that corner. And having that exit right there is really concerning to me, to add more traffic onto Woodburn, and especially just in that one little area there. It's I just want to know how a traffic study. I don't know that there is any traffic study that could tell you how treacherous that is. Thank you.
Sure. Hannah, do you want me to talk about that, or Mr. Laws? Or?
Mr. Oland, if you want to touch on that, and then yeah, we can go to Mr. Laws if there's anything additional.
Sure. So the traffic study, the scope of that in terms of what it studies can include not just volumes and flows, but turning movements and also visibility issues that clearly exist on Woodburn. So in addition to observation in the field, which is obviously the best indicator, it's also they can look at Woodburn itself, the design of it, what the visual impediments are along the north edge of Woodburn as you drive along there and you can't see, or if you're trying to turn out onto Woodburn. I know that's tough because you're looking backwards along the curve in both directions to try and see oncoming traffic. So that can all be studied within the traffic study. And it's been said before, but that's where the traffic engineers get in and make sure that what's being proposed is a good solution. And again, we'd be happy to take that connection to Woodburn off the map.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. It looks like Mr. Laws is ready to go.
Thanks, Hannah. So I think Paul hit it with a study. When we have curvature in a roadway like this where there's proposed access, the traffic engineer can conduct what's called the site visibility analysis for that section of road, which really takes a lot of things into consideration: existing topography, speed limits, volume of traffic, those types of things. I just want to also say that placement of the proposed driveway has not been analyzed in any way by the town. It's a location on a proposed site plan, has not been formally submitted or reviewed. So, and I've heard a couple times from Paul, that's something that they're going to probably remove from the site plan, but certainly we'll see that with a formal application at some point in the future.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland and Mr. Laws. So we are almost at 8 o'clock. There are a couple more hands and the folks have already spoken this evening. So I am going to kind of move us to close the meeting, but please definitely email us at ask@orovalleyaz.gov for any additional information or follow-ups. And Mr. Oland's contact information is on the project webpage as well. But I really appreciate everyone staying a little bit late, and we'll just go ahead and wrap things up here for the evening. And so Mr. Oland, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, so again, thank you all so much for attending tonight. We had a really great turnout, a lot of really good questions and comments. So thank you all so much for attending and staying later. So I'd like to conclude by reiterating the remaining steps of this process. So following a formal submittal from the applicant and staff review, a second neighborhood meeting will be held, and will be held over Zoom or will be in person. So an application for a rezoning requires consideration both by the Planning and Zoning Commission at a public hearing, and they will provide a formal recommendation to Town Council, who will consider the application at another public hearing for a final decision. And notices will be sent out in advance of all public meetings. Information has been posted on ovprojects.com and will be continually updated as the town receives more information from the applicant. So again, that includes a formal submittal and traffic impact analysis. So please use ovprojects.com throughout this process to stay informed. We will continue to notify property owners who received a yellow postcard for this meeting and post the property with yellow signs for upcoming events. If you wish to receive a postcard and did not for this meeting, please email ask@orovalleyaz.gov and provide your name and address, and we will ensure that you are notified next time. Again, I would like to reiterate that it is important to hear your comments and questions. Community participation is what makes Oro Valley a special place. Please send any questions and comments to ask@orovalleyaz.gov, and please stay in the know by checking into ovprojects.com under the project name shown on this slide. So thank you all so much again for your time tonight, and have a good rest of your evening.